I have absolutely no doubt that I'm probably going to catch a lot of hell for this particular video, but it's one that I feel like needs to be made. And before I go anywhere with this at all, I just want to be very upfront about this. I personally believe that slavery in any way, shape, form, or fashion is an utter disgrace. It goes against everything that makes us human beings. The thought of one human being owning another human being is as foreign to me as my ability to do Chinese algebra. And trust me, I cannot do Chinese algebra. I recently, with the increase of destruction of Confederate monuments, tearing them down, removing them, just read that Gettysburg is refusing to remove any monuments whatsoever, which I'm very glad of because a ground that saw 3 days of the bloodiest fighting imaginable needs to be left intact, which is much of the argument I'm about to make. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, and lasted officially until May 9th of 1865. Of course, it began with the firing on Fort Sumter by Confederate troops, and it ended in Palmetto Beach, the final battle. The Union fielded somewhere around 2,200,000 troops. The Confederacy, they're not really sure, but they yielded somewhere between 750,000 to a million troops. The Union lost 365,000 dead approximately, and approximately again, the Confederacy lost 290,000 dead. Now, those were all soldiers. There were approximately 50,000 civilian killed and 80,000 slaves killed. Overall, the total death numbers reached somewhere between 785,000 and over a million. You have to bear in mind that that is more American casualties than World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined. In 4 years, we lost more men than we've lost in the rest of the history of the United States. During Lincoln's inaugural speech on March 4th, 1861, he said, "I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the United States where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and have no inclination to do so." Now, he did, of course, change his entire stance on that, and he issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. But it only freed the states in Union-controlled Confederate areas. It didn't free any of the slaves in Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, and it did not apply to Tennessee or the counties of Virginia that were in the process of becoming the new state of West Virginia. Slavery and involuntary servitude were not made illegal in the United States until the passage of the 13th Amendment on January 31st, 1865. Lincoln, of course, was assassinated on April 15th, 1865. While even to this day it's still being debated, there's little doubt that slavery alone caused the Civil War. It's been argued that between 10 to 15% of all the Confederate soldiers owned slaves. If this number is true, then the number of Confederate troops was, say, 750,000. Then 637,500 of them went to war not owning slaves, if we use the higher end 15% number. If there were a million Confederate troops and we use that same high end percentage of 15%, then 850,000 of them went to war for slavery, never having owned a slave. Now, I'm not apologizing at all about slavery from the Confederacy, and I'm not trying to paint some sort of rosy Gone with the Wind type depiction of antebellum Southern states. It's a fact enshrined in the Confederate Constitution that slavery was a right of those slave owners. In Article 4, Section 3 of the Confederate Constitution, it clearly says, in part, "In all such territory, if Negro slavery, as it exists in the Confederate States, shall be recognized and protected by Congress." Now, this was pertaining to any new territories that the Confederacy might gain later. Basically, they were saying, we own slaves, and if we take over California, then California will be able to own slaves. Ironically, the Confederate Constitution banned the import of slaves from anywhere except for the United States of America. I find that very odd, but there it is. It's also in the Confederate Constitution, Article 1, Section 9. So while I'm not trying to make the Confederacy out to be the good guys of the Civil War, because they weren't, I'm really pointing out that it was more than just the idea of slavery to get so many men to fight the Union for 4 bloody years, always outnumbered, always better out supplied. I mean, the Union had much, much better supplies. They had better numbers. They had bigger guns. So while the cause they fought for was wrong, it in no way removes the personal courage of the soldiers that were fighting. One must remember that the Civil War, every casualty was American. It doesn't matter who it was. Every time a bullet hit someone, that was an American. The Statue of the Confederates may be a reminder of a terrible conflict and of terrible ideas, but that's one of the exact reasons why we should have them, to remember. If you erase your history, you will invariably repeat it. America's young compared to the rest of the world's nations. We suffered growing pains in abundance and will continue to do so. We're only 241 years old. We don't have thousands of years of history like Europe, the Middle East, India, etc. It would be a shame to destroy what little history we've managed to acquire in those 241 years, be it good, bad, or indifferent. I'm a white man, so I can't possibly know what it feels like to see a Confederate monument as a black man. But I do hope that if I was standing before one with my child at my side and that child looked at me and said, "Daddy, who is that?" I would answer, "That's a statue of a man from long ago that went to war to keep people like you and I as slaves." And when my child asked me, "But Daddy, if he was such a bad man, why do we have a statue of him here?" I would look my child in the eye and I would say, "So that we would never forget, and so that it will never happen again. If we remove our history, we will repeat it."